So for years, it's been a goal to go vintage motorcycle road racing. Years ago, I did some club racing on modern bikes and did a few races with Arma, once on a CB500 and a couple of times on an old BSA. However, at that time, you couldn't ride newer bikes in Arma. You could if they were like twins or something funky, but that was before the next gen classes that exist now where you can ride these 80s, 90s, early 2000s bikes. Prior to this year, I'd taken about a 10-year break from road racing. Got busy with having a family and rode a lot of like enduro adventure bikes, more dirt stuff. So it's been really fun to go back to the track, and it almost feels like new in a way, and kind of every time you're like making progress, and it's been really fun. And I've always had this goal of doing some Arma national events. Arma really appeals to me because it's a much more relaxed type paddock and racing than like say Moto America or something like that. And just the camaraderie of the people in Arma and the neat funky bikes, it's pretty appealing. And the cool thing is they still race at some pretty big tracks across the country. Here in the US, the biggest vintage race is Barber Vintage Festival in October. I went there a couple years ago, and I'd love to go race bikes at Barber. The challenge with that is that you can't just enter Barber, so you have to qualify to go there. So that would mean doing a few more races before. So I've been kind of looking at the schedule, and I figured out that there's 2 races on back-to-back weekends in July, one at Gingerman and one at Black Hawk Farms. So the thought is to go back to the Midwest next summer and do those 2 races on back-to-back weekends, stay in between, and depending on how that goes, maybe there's a chance we could go to Barber. I really want to go do some racing, but obviously to do that, we need some bikes. Okay, before we get too much further, if you guys could subscribe to the channel, that would really be helpful. YouTube told me that 96% of people that watch these videos aren't subscribed, so only 4% of people are subscribed. So if you click this little subscribe thing down at the bottom, you'll be notified of future videos. It helps us out a bunch on the analytics side, and we'd really appreciate it. Obviously, to go racing, we need motorcycles, and my thought is to take 2 bikes. So the thought process behind that is that there's a lot of travel involved, and these bikes can be a little bit temperamental with reliability. So it'd really suck to drive halfway across the country and have a problem with the bike and not be able to ride or race. So my thought is to have 2 bikes. So the one bike would be the 92 GSX-R 750 Slingshot that I recently finished. And then the second bike would be this 99 GSX-R 750 SRAD. So I'm really excited about the SRAD for a few reasons. One is that this bike should be relatively reliable, and it's one of the few fuel injected bikes that you can run in the Next Gen 2 class that Arma has. So my thought is that this bike should be relatively easy to run. There shouldn't be any messing with jetting, carburetor stuff, and it's actually a really good motorcycle. So I bought this bike back in May. I bought it sight unseen. I flew to Bellingham, Washington, and I rode it home in the rain and snow. Made a video about it. It was a little bit of a rough trip, but it was fun. It's cool. Check out the video. And the bike's been pretty awesome. I've ridden it at 3 different track days this summer. Slowly just kind of making improvements to it. We had some issues with brakes that we got dialed in, and then we did some gearing stuff to it, and then started working on suspension a little bit at the end of the year. So slowly made some improvements to the bike. The reason I've been a little bit hesitant to build this into a track bike is that it's a 1999, basically original motorcycle, and it seems like a little bit of a shame to like tear it apart. While it is complete, it isn't super clean, and I kind of got to the point where I was like, well, it's never really going to be like a collector or museum bike, because the fairings are like kind of rough. So I was like, this seems like a really good starting point to build a track bike. So there's been a small part of me throughout this whole year and going to the track, I was like, should I just buy like a new bike and this would just be so much easier? And that Yamaha R9 seems very tempting. However, looking at the R9, the bike's like 12.5, and then you look at like dealer markup, like you're gonna be the best part of 15 grand to get it out of the door. And then to build it into a track bike, you're probably close to another 3-4 grand. So maybe like 18,000 for a bike like that. And we're not really like doing new bikes. That's not what this channel's about. So my thought was, this is a really good starting point, and just spend some money on this bike. I think this bike cost me about $4,000, and when I bought it, it seems like to be pretty mechanically sound. So thought is to do some upgrades to this motorcycle and turn this into a track bike. One thing I have learned with working on bikes is that if you're organized, everything is so much easier. A lot of my inspiration from this comes from Aaron Colton. He's a Red Bull stunt rider. He does some really cool bike builds in his home garage, and his level of organization is on a completely other level. But doing the best I can. So before I got started on this bike, I cleaned the garage. I've got 2 completely clean workbenches. I have a tote. So the thought is that all the stock parts from the bike will go in the tote. So if I ever want to go back to a street bike, I have the parts. They're all in one place. They're all condensed. And just having like an organized, clean work area should make this whole process so much easier. So part of my process before I start a build like this is I start collecting images, just random stuff that I see online. I build a folder of pictures of the bike. So it's super helpful to see what other people have done, see some of the works bikes, and just some of these detailed pictures that will serve as inspiration for what parts to build. But then when it also comes to building the bike, kind of give some ideas on things to do and how it goes together, etc. Another thing I like to do before I start the project is I build out a spreadsheet with all the parts that I want for the bike. And then when I order them, I mark them as gray, and then I list the vendor, and then I put the total, what it costs. So I have a running total on here of what I've spent on the bike. And it's just a nice way to kind of keep track of the budget and kind of stay organized on what parts I've ordered, what parts I still need to order, and yeah, just keeping all the parts flowing. Okay, so we got all the fairings pulled off the bike, the tail unit, etc. Looking at it up close, like, kind of glad to be done with that bodywork. It's less clean than I remember. So yeah, stock bodywork's gone. As far as the build goes, I'm gonna keep it pretty sensible, do kind of like a super stock level build. So the primary focus is going to be replacing the bodywork with race bodywork, and then getting rid of all the street stuff. So lights, turn signals, tail light, etc. That's all got to go. There's also going to be a big focus on the rear of the bike. Street bikes are built to hold a passenger. So this whole rear of the bike is engineered to have 200 pounds sitting behind, which is not a scenario that I'll ever be in on the racetrack. So we'll do a bit of work kind of refiguring the tail of the bike, likely lightening up the subframe. This subframe is beefier than it needs to be and heavier. And then also on the rear suspension, because the bike is engineered to have a passenger, the spring rates and the linkage ratios might not be ideal for a single person on the track. So we're going to do a little bit of work to that. And then also getting rid of passenger foot pegs, etc. It's really tempting on a build like this to go absolutely crazy and buy a bunch of super expensive, hard to find parts. But I don't know if that's super practical for what I'm doing. I want to improve the areas of the bike that need to be improved, but I also want to just utilize as many of the stock components as possible. Man, it feels like Christmas. We got parts, so pretty excited. So one thing I'm going to do is change out the rear brake. So I've got this rear brake caliper holder from MotoGP Works, and then that will allow me to put on this Brembo rear caliper. Look at that thing, so cool. So yeah, we'll get rid of the stock rear brake caliper that's pretty heavy, and this should be quite a bit lighter than stock. Kind of jazz up the rear of the bike. This is an eBay find, so a manual APE cam chain tensioner. So that should be pretty cool. Whoa, got some Vortex goodies. So another big part of the build will just be cleaning up the whole controls of the bike. So we've got some Vortex 50mm clip-ons, Vortex gas cap, and then a brake lever guard. I know you need these in pro racing. Relatively sure you need them from Arma as well, but yeah, I'll need to check the rule book. But I think I'll do a front brake lever guard either way. Got these parts from Sport Bike Track Gear. So this is a kit that allows you to eliminate the rear brake reservoir. So kind of lighten things up, make it a little bit simpler. Got an R6 throttle tube. I'm not 100% sure this is going to work, but I'm led to believe that this will shorten up the throttle throw. So I might need a little bit of modification to go in the housing, but hopefully that'll make the throttle rotation less. Then this little driven stainless steel brake reservoir mount. And we got these parts from Woodcraft. This is a little jumper harness that will allow me to remove the stock ignition with the key. So obviously don't need a key on a race bike, and that stock ignition is like kind of heavy. So this is kind of cool because it'll allow me to get rid of that without any splicing of wires or anything. So if I ever did want to go back to the street, could use that. And then a case cover or case guard, and then another little harness. This is a side stand switch eliminator harness. So again, another way to do that without splicing wires, etc. It's actually kind of surprising of how many parts are still out there for this SRAD. It's like a 26-year-old motorcycle, but you still can find a few parts here and there. You kind of have to dig deep on some of these websites. Little Graves engine cover, so that's kind of cool. Okay, some Gale Speed parts. So I have these levers on the 92 Slingshot, and they're super trick and really cool. Been really happy with them so far, and part of the thought process is to run these on this bike just to eliminate the amount of different parts on the bike, so they're as similar as they can be. So we've got a Gale Speed master cylinder, front brake master cylinder. So these parts are super cool, and just like the packaging and everything that they do, you can tell that it's a pretty high-end product. And then there's a matching clutch lever, some beautiful Japanese billet parts. So I'm pretty excited about those. Then we got a rear brake return spring kit and a front brake master cylinder reservoir. And then here we got some new radiator hoses, or coolant hoses. So pretty cool, blue coolant hoses, AS3 performance, so those will be pretty cool. I also have a set of Crescent rear sets that I was able to find in Scotland. So it's kind of a small world. I grew up in Scotland, my parents still live in Scotland, and I found a guy on one of the SRAD groups that was selling some parts who lived 10 minutes down the road from where my parents live. So I bought some cool Crescent rear sets from him, and they're at my mum's house, and I'm not sure how those are going to make it to America, but we'll get them here at some point. I've got quite a few of the parts, obviously need quite a few more. I've got some body work that's coming from the UK, so pretty excited for that to arrive. I have a race upper and lower that I bought used this summer, so there's a good chance I'll probably use those, and then the other fiberglass from the UK for the tail unit and the ram air tubes. I also am very excited. I bit the bullet and I have some Dimag wheels coming. So I was kind of on the fence about wheels. I talked to a few people and they were like, one of the biggest improvements you make to these bikes is putting lighter wheels on it. So I bit the bullet and I got these really cool Dimags coming from the UK. So those should be here early 2026. So I'm really excited to be jumping into another project. I'm really excited about the SRAD, and I know there's a lot of people who are super excited about this bike. It seems like anytime I post something about SRAD, you guys are really excited about it. So it has a really cool, passionate fan base. So if you have any hints or ideas or tips for building this bike, please let me know in the comments. as much feedback is helpful. So yeah, got a long way to go on the bike obviously, but we're at the stage where we got it pulled apart. I've got some parts here, got some more parts coming, and through the winter we're going to keep plugging away at this bike, and the goal would be to have it ready to hit the racetrack in the spring as soon as the snow melts on some of the first track days. So I have a few track days to get it dialed in, get up to speed, and then hopefully ready to race by midsummer. So yeah, really excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm super pumped on the bike. And yeah, thanks everybody for watching. If you can leave a subscription, that'd be super helpful. Again, I really appreciate everybody watching these videos. It means a lot. And thank you. And we will see you on the next one.